Nevada hides secrets far older and stranger than any casino vault. Beyond the neon glow of Las Vegas lies a vast, silent desert, a landscape that has swallowed entire civilizations, concealed desperate treasures, and witnessed lights in the sky that defy all explanation. This is a journey into the shadowy corners of the Silver State, where history does not give up its mysteries easily. By the end, you will uncover a hidden Nevada, a place where the past whispers unanswered questions from empty canyons and abandoned mines. We will explore why an ancient people vanished from their cliffside cities without a trace, and what two police officers really saw during a dogfight with an impossible aircraft over Reno. What is the most enduring mystery a landscape can hold? The silence of the desert is not empty, it is layered with forgotten echoes. Long before the first prospector arrived, an entire civilization carved its home into the very rock of Nevada. We know them as the Ancestral Puebloans, though the older Navajo name, Anasazi, meaning ancient enemies or ancient ones, still lingers. In places like the Valley of Fire, their legacy is written in stone, a silent testament to a people who mastered a harsh world, only to vanish from it completely. Their story is Nevada's first great unsolved mystery. Imagine standing in that crimson landscape, the sun blazing off sandstone that seems to burn from within. Here they built not simple huts, but intricate multi-story dwellings tucked into high cliff alcoves. These were not primitive shelters, they were architectural marvels designed for defense, for community, and for survival. They cultivated corn, beans, and squash in the arid soil, engineered complex water catchment systems, and created a society with trade routes stretching for hundreds of miles. They were thriving, sophisticated, and deeply connected to this difficult land. Then, around the year 1300, something happened, something that prompted them to walk away from everything they had built. The cliffside apartments of the Valley of Fire and countless other sites across the region fell quiet. Pots were left behind, tools were set down, and the hearth fires grew cold. It was not a sudden, panicked flight, but a deliberate community-wide exodus. They simply left, migrating south and east to join other Pueblo groups, leaving their magnificent stone cities to the wind and the sun. So what drove them out? The central mystery is not if they left, but why. The most compelling theory points to a megadrought, a prolonged period of severe aridity that lasted for decades. In a land where water was already precious, a drought spanning generations would have been catastrophic. Crops would have failed, game would have become scarce, and the carefully managed resources would have dwindled to nothing. The land itself may have simply turned against them, but was it just the climate? Some researchers suggest internal, social, or religious strife. Perhaps their society fractured under the strain, with conflict or a loss of faith in their leaders making the communities untenable. Others point to the possibility of external pressures, like raids from nomadic groups moving into the area as the climate shifted. It was likely a combination of factors, a perfect storm of environmental and social collapse that made staying impossible. The true haunting quality of their departure is its completeness. They left no written records, no carvings explaining their decision. We are left with only the physical evidence, the empty rooms and silent plazas, forcing us to piece together a narrative from pottery shards and soil samples. Their disappearance set a profound precedent in this land, a theme of enigmatic absence woven into Nevada's very soil. It asks us, what does it take for people to abandon their home? And what echoes of that ancient choice still whisper through the canyons today? Centuries later, archaeologists arrived to sift through that silence. In the cool shadows of those abandoned cliff dwellings, they found a scene frozen in time, yet maddeningly incomplete. Pottery vessels, some still whole, sat as if waiting for their owners to return. Stone tools were left on workbenches, and granaries still held traces of maize. This was not the aftermath of a violent invasion. There were no signs of battle or massacre. It was instead the evidence of a planned and orderly exit. They took what they could carry and left the rest, suggesting they intended to travel far and light. But the very normalcy of these artifacts deepens the mystery. If the departure was so deliberate, why did no one ever come back? The artifacts whisper of a finality so absolute, it feels like a door closing for the last time. Modern science has added layers to the story, but not a definitive ending. Tree ring data from ancient timbers confirms the era of the Great Drought. painting a picture of a land slowly dying of thirst. Yet other Puebloan communities in equally harsh regions endured, so drought alone cannot be the full answer. This is where the whispers of legend and oral history enter, offering a different kind of evidence. Some Native American traditions, passed down through generations, speak of a spiritual imbalance, a time when the people fell out of harmony with the natural world. In these stories, the departure is not just a migration, but a necessary journey to restore balance, a quest for a new center. These perspectives remind us that their world was not just one of subsistence, but of profound spiritual connection. Could a cultural or religious crisis have been the final push, making a habitable place feel spiritually uninhabitable, so we are left circling the central, unanswerable question? Was it a single catastrophic cause or that perfect storm? The drought provided the unbearable pressure. Social tensions may have provided the fracture lines. And perhaps a spiritual or prophetic directive provided the final map to a new homeland. Their vanishing act established a haunting pattern in this landscape, a precedent that the desert is a place where things and people can be erased from the narrative. It sets the stage for every disappearance that follows in Nevada's history, from lone prospectors to strange craft in the sky. If an entire civilization can fade into the desert's embrace, leaving only cryptic ruins behind, what chance does a single secret have? That theme of disappearance would echo again, not centuries later, but within a single brutal winter. The story of the Donner Party is etched into American history as a synonym for desperation, but its opening acts were written in the Nevada desert, a prelude to the horror in the Sierra snows. In the autumn of 1846, the wagon train reached the most dreaded stretch of the entire westward trail, the 40-mile desert between the Humboldt Sink and the Truckee River. This was Nevada at its most merciless. The Humboldt River, which they had followed for weeks, simply vanished into a vast, alkaline wasteland. What lay ahead was a flat, shimmering plain of sand and salt, with no water and little grass for the exhausted oxen. The crossing was a forced march of pure survival. Animals collapsed and were left behind. Wagons were abandoned as families desperately lightened their loads, discarding precious heirlooms and supplies in the sand. The air reeked of death and despair. By the time they stumbled upon the Truckee River, they were shattered, and a fatal delay in the mountains ahead was already guaranteed. The core tragedy is well documented, but the desert holds whispers of smaller, quieter vanishings within the larger catastrophe. As the party fractured under stress, as small groups sometimes scouted ahead or fell behind, could individuals have become permanently separated in that immense, featureless landscape? Folklore and scattered pioneer accounts suggest yes. There are persistent, unconfirmed tales that not every soul who entered the Nevada desert with the Donner Party left it. Some stories speak of a young man, delirious with thirst, who wandered away from the trail and was simply never seen again. Others hint at more mysterious ends, suggesting that a very few, perhaps those who separated earlier, might have been taken in by Native American bands in the region. These are not historical facts, but lingering echoes in local oral tradition. The idea of a survivor choosing to stay or being too weak to continue and integrating into a tribal community long after the rescuers had come and gone is a powerful and haunting footnote. It speaks to the desert's ability to absorb people into its narrative, blurring the line between tragedy and transformation. While the mountain camp became a frozen tomb, the Nevada desert presented a different kind of vanishing, one not of stark endings, but of ambiguous fade-outs. If true, these fragments of story mean that for some, the ordeal did not end at Donner Lake, but quietly unraveled in the vast silence of the Great Basin, leaving behind only a question mark in the sand. The desert's hunger for stories did not end with ancient migrations or pioneer tragedies. It found a new kind of hero to consume, one born from speed and legend. The Pony Express was a fleeting moment in history, a 10-month blaze of riders and horses stitching the continent together with sheer courage. And among those riders, few names shine brighter than Robert Haslam, known forever as Pony Bob. His most famous ride is the stuff of frontier epic. In May of 1860, with the Paiute War raging across the Nevada Territory, Haslam was tasked with carrying the mail. He rode his initial 75-mile stretch, only to find the next rider too terrified to go on, fearing Paiute attacks, so Pony Bob turned his horse around and rode back. He completed a staggering 380 miles in less than 2 days, changing horses at relay stations, riding through known hostile territory, and arriving at his destination exhausted, wounded by an arrow, but with the mail intact. He was the embodiment of the Pony Express ideal, a national celebrity for his bravery and endurance. But here is where the Nevada mystery takes hold. What happens to a legend when the world moves on? After the Pony Express folded, replaced by the telegraph, Haslam lived a life fitting of a frontiersman. He worked as a scout, a sheriff, and even a messenger for Wells Fargo. He was always on the move, a man of action who had outlived his most famous moment. Then in the late 1870s or early 1880s, he traveled to a mining camp, likely in Nevada or possibly in the Utah Territory. He was seen there, this aging hero of a bygone era, and then he was not. Robert Haslam walked into the desert and vanished without a trace. No grave was ever definitively found. No reliable death record exists. The man who had become a symbol of relentless, traceable motion simply disappeared from the map. How does a figure of such renown become a ghost? The theories are as sparse and stark as the landscape he vanished into. One suggests foul play. The mining camps were rough places, and a man with a known history, perhaps carrying money or old grudges, could have met a violent end, his body hidden in a canyon or an abandoned shaft. Another quieter theory proposes that Pony Bob, weary of his own legend or perhaps down on his luck, chose to shed his identity. He might have adopted an alias, died quietly in obscurity in some small town, and been buried in a pauper's grave under a false name. His final ride was not on horseback but into anonymity. This disappearance feels uniquely poignant. It is not the tragedy of a group like the Donner Party, but the slow, silent erasure of an individual. The desert that once served as the backdrop for his greatest triumph finally enveloped him completely. It is as if the very land that witnessed his legendary speed demanded a final, lasting stillness. One of the West's most celebrated riders became its most elusive ghost, leaving us to wonder if the desert grants fame only to later reclaim it in silence. From legendary riders to lost silver, the desert's next great obsession was buried deep underground. The Comstock lode was not just a mine, it was an earthquake of wealth that created a city overnight. Discovered in 1859 beneath what would become Virginia City, it was the first major silver strike in the United States, a vein so immense it would finance the Civil War and build San Francisco. Fortunes were pulled from the dark, hot tunnels, creating instant millionaires known as the Silver Kings. Mansions sprang up on the mountainside, and the dusty camp transformed into a metropolis of opera houses and ornate saloons, a glittering island of civilization in the raw Nevada wilderness. But the miners who toiled thousands of feet below, in temperatures that could soar past 130 degrees, whispered of a different kind of treasure. They called it hoodoo silver. These were the freak pockets, the unbelievably rich concentrations of ore that could make a poor man wealthy with a single swing of his pick. To find one was the dream of every man who descended into those shafts, yet a chilling superstition took hold, the belief that this particular silver carried a curse. The stories that filtered up to the surface were enough to give any seasoned miner pause. There was the tale of a man who uncovered a nest of pure silver so beautiful it looked like a sculpture. He celebrated his newfound fortune that very night, only to be killed the next day in a completely unrelated rockfall in a different part of the tunnel. Another miner, after selling his astonishing claim for a small fortune, lost every cent in a series of bewildering bad investments and died penniless within a year. Others spoke of mysterious illnesses that struck down only those who had touched a certain vein, or of freak equipment failures that seemed to target the lucky few. The pattern was always the same, a sudden, dazzling strike of luck followed by an equally sudden and tragic reversal. So what was behind the legend of the hoodoo silver? In the supercharged, paranoid atmosphere of the Comstock, coincidence could easily be woven into a curse. The mines were objectively deadly places, with cave-ins, fires, and flooding claiming lives every day. If a man struck it rich one week and died the next, the human mind naturally sought a connection, a reason for the cruel twist of fate. Superstition was a coping mechanism, a way to make sense of the random violence of the underground world. It was easier to believe in a curse than to accept that fortune and death were handed out by the same indifferent geology. Yet there is a darker, more pragmatic possibility lurking in the shadows of those timber tunnels. The Comstock was a world of cutthroat competition and staggering greed. Claim jumping was a constant threat, and the legal battles over mine boundaries were legendary for their complexity and corruption. In such an environment, a fantastically rich pocket was the ultimate prize, and the man who found it became a target. Could some of these so-called curses have been carefully arranged? A sabotaged timber here, a tampered air pump there, or even a hired assailant in a dark alley could look like a supernatural punishment to the outside world. The curse was a perfect cover for murder. This duality captures the essence of Nevada's Boomtown era, a frantic dance between incredible opportunity and profound peril. The desert gave up its hidden wealth, but it seemed to demand a heavy price, whether through the capriciousness of fate or the treachery of men. The whispers of hoodoo silver ask us a difficult question. In a place where greed is the primary motive, how do you tell the difference between a curse and a crime? The desert's legends grew larger with every vanished soul, culminating in a story so vast it seemed to swallow an entire community. The year was 1849, and the fever for California gold pulled a human river westward. Among the throngs was a wagon train of immense size, some accounts claiming over 100 wagons carrying men, women, and children. They chose a supposed shortcut, venturing into the brutal expanse of the Great Basin, aiming for the Black Rock Desert. The land swallowed their tracks, and they were never seen alive again. For years, it was just another grim rumor on the trail, until a government surveyor named Captain J. H. Simpson claimed to have found the proof. In 1859, he reported discovering a chilling scene in a remote valley. A circle of wagons, their wood bleached white by the sun, stood as a silent corral. Inside and around them were the scattered skeletons of the party, a final, desperate camp that had become a tomb. His account, published in newspapers back east, cemented the tale of the lost wagon train into Western folklore, a ghost story on a monumental scale. Yet when later expeditions went searching for this phantom caravan, they found nothing. No circle of wagons, no field of bones. The very landscape of the Black Rock seemed to deny the story. This absence forced historians to pick apart the legend. Could Captain Simpson have been mistaken or even dishonest? His detailed report gave the story credibility, but without physical evidence, doubt crept in. Many researchers now believe the lost train of 1849 is a tragic conflation, a gathering of several smaller, very real disasters into one epic tale. The desert did claim many lives that year, from isolated families to small groups who perished from thirst or exposure. Over time, through retellings around campfires and sensational newspaper articles, these separate tragedies may have merged in the public imagination, becoming a single catastrophic event. It was a narrative shorthand for the very real dangers of the trail, but the vastness of the Black Rock Desert invites a more haunting possibility. What if the evidence is still out there? This is not a forest where undergrowth quickly reclaims a site. This is a desert of stark, open playa and rugged mountain ranges, a place where a wreck could remain visible for a century, or be buried under shifting sands in a single season. A circle of wagons could have slowly disintegrated, the wood scattered by winds, the bones carried off by scavengers. The desert is not a static museum, it is an active, erasing force. The lack of evidence does not definitively prove the story false, it only proves the desert is adept at keeping secrets. This legend, whether born from fact or fear, serves a deeper purpose. It became the ultimate cautionary tale for every traveler who looked at a map and considered a shortcut. It represented the collective anxiety of an era, the understanding that the West was not just a place of opportunity, but a gargantuan, indifferent landscape that could make an entire community disappear without a whisper. The story asks us which is more powerful, a historical fact or a myth that shapes behavior. The phantom train, real or not, changed how people moved across the land, its warning echoing longer than any single set of bones ever could. The desert's silence could swallow a wagon train, but in the bustling streets of Virginia City, secrets demanded a more violent exit. In the cold afternoon of January 29, 1875, former United States Congressman and current Carson City District Attorney William Woodburn was walking down C Street, the bustling heart of the silver metropolis. A man stepped out from the crowd, raised a pistol, and fired a single shot into Woodburn's chest. The district attorney stumbled, fell, and died right there on the wooden sidewalk, in full view of a horrified public. It was a brazen political assassination in the middle of the day. The assassin made no attempt to flee. He was arrested immediately, and his name was Frank McMillan. With the killer in custody and dozens of witnesses, the case seemed as solid as the Comstock Lode itself. This would be an open and shut trial, a swift execution of justice for a cold-blooded murder. Except nothing in Virginia City was ever that simple. The trials of Frank McMillan became a spectacle that exposed the raw nerves of power in the young state of Nevada. His defense was audacious. He did not deny pulling the trigger. Instead, he claimed he had acted in self-defense, stating that Woodburn had threatened him and had gone for a weapon first. This was a difficult story to sell given the very public nature of the shooting, but McMillan had something more powerful than an alibi. He had connections. His first trial ended in a hung jury, unable to reach a verdict. The second trial, even more controversially, ended with a full acquittal. Frank McMillan walked out of the courtroom a free man. The public was stunned. How could a man who shot a district attorney in cold blood on a crowded street simply go free? The verdict pointed to something rotten beneath Virginia City's gilded surface, suggesting that the real power in Nevada did not reside in a courtroom, but in a boardroom. All suspicion turned toward the most formidable institution in the West, the Bank of California, and its ruthless Nevada agent, William Sharon. The bank, through Sharon, held a financial stranglehold on the Comstock Lode, controlling mines, mills, and politicians through a web of loans and leverage. William Woodburn, as district attorney, was known to be investigating the bank's monopolistic and possibly corrupt practices. He was a threat, a man with the legal authority to potentially unravel an empire. McMillan, it was whispered, was no lone gunman. He was a pawn, a hired hand dispatched to eliminate a problem. The acquittal was not a miscarriage of justice, but the proof of the conspiracy's success. The Bank of California's influence was believed to extend to the jury box, with witnesses possibly intimidated and legal maneuvers expertly deployed to secure the desired outcome. In this theory, McMillan was just the instrument, the man who fired the bullet, while the true architects of the murder sat in plush offices, their hands clean. Yet the full truth remains buried. No evidence directly linking William Sharon or the Bank of California to McMillan was ever proven in a court of law. The case officially remains unsolved, a cold file from the 19th century. This ambiguity is what makes the murder so enduringly sinister. It represents the moment when Nevada's wild frontier violence matured into something more sophisticated and far more dangerous, the corruption of its very institutions. Was it a personal dispute gone tragically wrong, as the defense claimed, or was it a calculated hit, a message to anyone who would dare challenge the financial kings of the Comstock? The murder of William Woodburn is a crack in the foundation of the state's history. We can peer through it and see the shadowy outlines of power, money, and impunity, but the complete picture is forever out of reach. It asks a question that echoes far beyond Virginia City. How do you solve a crime when the system itself is a suspect? Power and corruption cast long shadows, but the Nevada sky held mysteries of an entirely different order. On a clear August night in 1952, the desert above Reno became a theater for the impossible. Two Reno police officers, Sergeant Roy Miller and Officer Andrew Hammond, were on a routine patrol when they saw something that would redefine their understanding of reality. High in the moonlit sky, three brilliant white lights were engaged in a frantic, silent ballet. As they watched, the lights resolved into distinct shapes. Two were conventional fighter jets, their outlines familiar. The third was something else entirely, a silver, disc-shaped object that moved with a fluid grace that defied every law of physics they knew. This was not a distant light. This was a close-range, structured craft, and it was being pursued. The officers radioed in their sighting, and soon a Washoe County deputy sheriff joined them, a third credible witness to the unfolding spectacle. For nearly 30 minutes, the trio watched transfixed as the silent dogfight played out. The disc executed maneuvers that left the jets trailing helplessly behind. It could stop dead in midair, hover motionless, then accelerate to blistering speeds in an instant, making sharp 90-degree turns without any apparent slowing. It moved with an intelligence and capability that rendered the cutting-edge military technology obsolete. The jets, identified later as Air Force F-86 Sabre jets, were not just observers, they were active participants, firing what appeared to be tracer rounds at the object. The disc, however, seemed utterly untouchable, dodging with an ease that bordered on mockery before finally shooting straight upward and vanishing into the star field. Here was a case with everything ufologists dream of: multiple trained law enforcement observers, a prolonged visual encounter, military involvement, and a detailed description of a technological marvel. The witnesses were rock solid, respected men with no reason to fabricate such a story, and their accounts matched perfectly. The United States Air Force, through its then active Project Blue Book, was forced to investigate. Their official conclusion, delivered after reviewing the reports, was a classic of Cold War-era dismissal. They attributed the entire event to a temperature inversion, a meteorological phenomenon where layers of warm air trap cooler air below, bending light and causing stars or planets to appear to dance and shimmer in the sky. To the three officers on the ground, this explanation was not just inadequate, it was insulting. They had not seen a shimmering star, they had seen a solid metallic disc, estimated to be 30 to 50 feet in diameter, engage in a tactical engagement with jet fighters. They saw defined shapes, precise movements, and aggressive maneuvers. A temperature inversion does not explain structured craft, it does not explain 90-degree turns, and it certainly does not explain jets firing tracers at a mirage. The men stood by their story until their deaths, their credibility unchallenged by anything but the official report. The significance of the Reno dogfight cannot be overstated. It stands as one of the most compelling multiple witness cases in American history, precisely because the witnesses were not farmers in a field, but trained observers used to assessing threats and identifying aircraft. It directly involved the United States military in a chase scenario, moving the phenomenon from the realm of lonely lights to that of aerial confrontation. And the Air Force's patently weak explanation only served to deepen the mystery, suggesting an active desire to explain away rather than to understand. This incident did more than just report a UFO. It framed the phenomenon as something that could interact with and outperform our best military technology. It transformed the mystery from a question of what is out there to a far more unsettling question: what happens when it decides to come down here and show us what it can do? No place on Earth is more synonymous with secrets than that remote stretch of Nevada desert northwest of Las Vegas. Area 51 has transcended status as a military base to become a global icon, a blank screen onto which we project our deepest anxieties and wildest hopes about technology and the unknown. But to understand its true mystery, we must look past the alien stickers and conspiracy t-shirts, back to its very real and equally astonishing origins. The site was born from absolute necessity during the Cold War. In the early 1950s, with fears of Soviet nuclear attack at a peak, the United States needed a place to develop and test aircraft that could fly higher and see deeper than anything before, invisible to enemy radar. The dry lake bed known as Groom Lake, surrounded by mountains and already within the vast Nellis bombing range, offered perfect isolation. The first great secret to call this place home was the U-2 spy plane. To the public, it was a high-altitude weather research aircraft. In reality, its silent, glider-like silhouette was cruising at 70,000 feet, peering into the heart of the Soviet Union. The incredible altitudes at which it flew led directly to the second wave of mystery. Commercial pilots, suddenly sharing airspace with these silver gliders miles above their normal routes, began reporting unidentified flying objects. The government, bound by secrecy, could not explain. These pilot sightings were the first seeds of the modern UFO phenomenon, and they were sown directly from the runways of Area 51. Secrecy was the base's founding principle, and it bred speculation like a greenhouse. When an even more advanced, staggeringly fast spy plane called the Oxcart, or the SR-71 Blackbird, entered testing, the veil grew thicker. The bizarre shape of the Oxcart, like a dark, darting insect, only fueled the fire. The base operated under a blanket of official denial. It did not exist on maps, its workers were sworn to silence, and any strange lights or sounds were met with a wall of classified silence. This vacuum of information became the perfect habitat for legend. The central unsolved aspects of Area 51 are not about whether it exists, but about the boundaries of its truth. First, the true purpose and full scope of its advanced testing. We know about the U-2 and the Blackbird, but what came next? The stealth technology of the F-117 Nighthawk was developed in the 1970s and 80s. This suggests a continuous pipeline of unimaginable aerospace projects, each more advanced than the last. What is being tested there today? Vehicles that make hypersonic speed look slow. Craft that utilize propulsion physics we cannot yet publicly conceive. The black budget, money allocated for classified projects with no public oversight, is the engine of this mystery. The exact figures and the specific projects they fund are the most guarded secrets in the nation. This leads directly to the second enduring question, the nature of those black budget projects themselves. Are they all terrestrial advancements, however radical, or does at least one of those locked hangars hold something not of this world? The persistent rumor of recovered extraterrestrial technology, the so-called reverse engineering program, is the ghost in the machine of Area 51. It is fueled by decades of cryptic testimonies from supposed insiders, by the government's historically dismissive stance on UFOs despite compelling evidence like the Reno dogfight, and by a simple, compelling logic. If you were the government and did recover anomalous material, where else would you take it but to your most secret advanced aerospace facility? The official line is a flat denial, but in a place built on lies for national security, how can any denial be fully trusted? The mystery is sustained by this perfect circular logic of secrecy. Then in 2019, the legend of Area 51 wrote a bizarre, modern chapter that proved its grip on the public imagination. The Storm Area 51 event began as a joke on social media, a call for millions to raid the base and see the aliens. It spiraled into a real-world phenomenon, drawing thousands of curious, costumed pilgrims to the tiny desert town of Rachel, Nevada. While no one actually stormed the heavily guarded gates, the gathering was a cultural spectacle. It was part festival, part protest against secrecy, and a vivid demonstration that the myth had grown far beyond government control. It showed that in the age of the internet, a mystery does not fade, it evolves, finding new life in memes and collective curiosity. The event asked a poignant question: what does it mean when a state secret becomes the world's worst kept secret, yet remains utterly impenetrable? Area 51 endures because it represents the ultimate intersection of two human desires, the need for security and the hunger for wonder. It is both a very real fortress of national defense and a modern-day castle of myth. We may never know the full catalog of its secrets, whether they are all brilliant human inventions or something more. But its power lies in that very uncertainty, in the silent desert that holds its answers, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring mysteries are the ones we are told, point blank, we cannot solve. While Area 51 secrets are fiercely guarded by the state, other Nevada mysteries float openly in the night sky, available for anyone brave enough to venture into the empty dark. Far from the perimeter fences of Groom Lake, in the profound isolation of places like Monitor Valley, a different kind of unexplained phenomenon dances. For generations, people have reported strange self-illuminated orbs hovering over the desert floor. These are not distant specks, but vivid, colored lights that perform an impossible ballet. They glow with an intense white, yellow, or sometimes red light. They pulse with a slow, rhythmic intelligence. Witnesses describe them splitting apart into two separate orbs, then merging back together seamlessly. They dart sideways with abrupt, jerky motions or shoot straight up and vanish. They are Nevada's own answer to the famous Marfa Lights of Texas, a homegrown natural mystery that refuses to be solved. The accounts are remarkably consistent, and they come from credible observers, ranchers who know every canyon and butt on their land-sea lights where no roads exist. Geologists on field surveys document orbs that move against the wind. Campers who set up their tents in the vast silence watch in awe as the light show begins after sunset, a silent performance with no apparent source. One of the most compelling aspects is their behavior. Unlike an airplane or satellite, these lights exhibit a playful, almost curious intelligence in their movement. They approach, retreat, and sometimes seem to react to the presence of human observers. This quality pushes the phenomenon beyond a simple misidentification and into the realm of a genuine, localized enigma. So what creates these phantom lanterns? Science offers its leading suspect, rooted deep in the very bones of Nevada. The state is a geological treasure chest, riddled with fault lines and rich in quartz-bearing rock. This sets the stage for a phenomenon called piezoelectricity. In simple terms, when certain crystals like quartz are subjected to intense mechanical stress, such as the grinding of tectonic plates along a fault, they can generate an electrical charge. The theory suggests that massive subterranean pressures could build up these charges, which then discharge into the air above, ionizing the atmosphere and creating glowing balls of plasma. This could explain the light's appearance, their movement along geological seams, and even their colors, which can change with the type of gas being ionized. It is a compelling, natural explanation that turns the landscape itself into a giant, slow-burning battery. Yet, as with all good Nevada mysteries, the full story may not be so simple. While piezoelectricity explains the how, it struggles with some of the nuanced behaviors witnesses report. The deliberate seeming movements, the splitting and merging, the apparent duration of the displays. These traits seem to require a guiding force, not just a random spark. This gap in the explanation leaves the door open for more speculative ideas. Some researchers point to other, less understood geological processes, like the venting of radioactive gases from deep within the Earth. Others, looking at the light's reported intelligence, wonder if we are observing a form of energy or consciousness we simply do not yet have the physics to describe. The lights become a Rorschach test, where we see either fascinating natural physics or something hinting at a frontier of science we have yet to cross. Ultimately, the power of these valley lights lies in their accessibility. Unlike a classified military base, this mystery is democratic. It plays out over public land, under an open sky, for anyone patient enough to watch. They represent a puzzle that belongs not to the government, but to the land itself. Are they simply the desert breathing, emitting silent, luminous sighs from its seismic depths? Or are they something else, a permanent resident of these empty spaces that we have yet to properly introduce ourselves to? The lights ask no permission and offer no answers, content to simply glow in the dark, reminding us that some of Nevada's greatest secrets are not hidden in vaults, but are hanging in the air, waiting to be seen. The silent desert seemed to offer a final, cruel twist to one of America's most infamous child disappearances. In 1928, a 9-year-old boy named Walter Collins vanished from his Los Angeles neighborhood, a case that would spiral into the grotesque Wineville chicken coop murders. A disturbed man named Gordon Stewart Northcott confessed to a series of abductions and killings, claiming Walter as one of his victims. The tragedy appeared solved, a horrific but closed chapter. Then a rumor surfaced that pulled the mystery east into the heart of Nevada. An unverified tip came in, suggesting a boy matching Walter's description had been seen in a remote mining camp near Tonopah. This was not just any place. Tonopah was a boomtown past its prime, a rugged outpost of lonely men and hard labor, precisely the kind of location where a lost child might be hidden or simply overlooked. The possibility, however faint, sent investigators into the desert. They combed through the camps and the dusty streets of Tonopah, asking questions, showing photographs. But the Nevada desert gave up nothing. No concrete evidence was found, no witnesses could provide reliable confirmation, and the lead evaporated into the dry air as so many others had. This dead end should have been the final footnote, yet the Nevada connection persists in the retelling of the Collins saga. Why does this particular ghost refuse to fade? The answer lies in the powerful duality of the desert itself. On one hand, it represents the ultimate void, a place where things disappear forever, making it a logical, if grim, endpoint for a missing child. On the other, it symbolizes a perverse kind of hope. In the public imagination, the vast emptiness held a sliver of possibility that the official horrifying story was wrong. Maybe Walter had not been murdered. Maybe he had been taken for reasons unknown to a distant mining camp and might still be alive out there in the sagebrush. This Nevada clue allowed people to hold onto a narrative slightly less monstrous than the one Northcott provided. It transformed a story of certain death into one of ambiguous loss, which in a strange way is easier to bear. The Tonopah tip, however unsubstantiated, served as a pressure valve for a horrified public. It meant the desert might hold a secret more merciful than the chicken coop. This enduring whisper underscores a profound truth about Nevada's role in our national psyche. When a story becomes too terrible to accept in full, we sometimes send a piece of it into the desert, allowing the landscape to absorb our doubts and our fragile hopes. The vanishing of Walter Collins is officially a California tragedy, but its shadow stretches across the state line, resting in the silent hills near Tonopah, a phantom alternative to an unbearable truth. A body of water can hide a man as completely as a desert. In the early 1900s, Pyramid Lake was the stage for a vanishing act so perfect, it turned a businessman into a ghost story. The man at the center was E.C. Waters, a flamboyant and controversial entrepreneur who saw opportunity in the lake's deep blue waters. He operated a steamboat, a small but elegant vessel he named the Meteor, which he used to ferry tourists, fishermen, and supplies across the 25-mile expanse. Waters was a showman, a promoter who understood the allure of the remote and the scenic, but his business acumen was less steady than his boat. He accumulated debts, tangled in legal disputes over leases and land rights with the local Paiute tribe, and faced mounting pressure from creditors. His world was closing in, a financial noose tightening with each passing season. Then on a day in 1915, the Meteor was discovered adrift on the lake, its engine still running, circling lazily in the water with no one at the helm. E.C. Waters was nowhere to be found. A hat was found floating nearby. The immediate assumption was a tragic accident, a man who had fallen overboard and drowned in the lake's famously cold and deep waters. A search commenced, but it yielded nothing. No body surfaced. In a place where drowning victims were usually recovered, the lake gave up no such evidence. The absence of a corpse quickly fermented into suspicion. Given Waters' dire financial straits, the whispers began almost immediately. Had this been no accident at all, but a meticulously staged exit? The theory was compellingly simple. A man drowning in debt stages his own death. He sets his boat adrift, leaves a personal item like a hat as a final clue, and slips away into the vastness of the American West. With no body to prove otherwise, he is declared legally dead. His debts are dissolved, and he is free to reinvent himself under a new name in a new town. It was the ultimate escape plan, using the lake's mystery as his cover. The rumors gained traction because they fit the man's profile. Waters was a schemer, a promoter used to crafting narratives. Faking his death would have been the ultimate promotion, a story where he wrote his own ending. People speculated he might have fled to California, or perhaps even farther to South America, leaving his old identity at the bottom of Pyramid Lake in the public's imagination. Yet the lake itself complicates the tale. Pyramid Lake is profound and notoriously cold, with depths that can indeed keep secrets forever. It is entirely possible a body was simply never found, consumed by the elements or lost in the underwater topography. The accident theory is just as valid as the escape plan. This duality is what makes the story endure. E.C. Waters left behind a perfect ambiguity. He became a watery legend, a man who is either a cautionary tale about the dangers of the deep or a masterclass in fraudulent disappearance. His story merges with the lore of the lake, a reminder that in Nevada, even a clear blue surface can hide a bottomless mystery. Was he a victim of the water, or did he use it as the final prop in his greatest show? The lake keeps that answer, leaving us with a ghost who might never have died at all. Gold was not the only treasure the Olinghouse Hills yielded, and misfortune seemed to follow both. Nestled in the rugged hills east of Reno, the Olinghouse mine began as a promising source of gold in the late 1800s, but its real value was discovered later: tungsten. This incredibly hard metal, vital for strengthening steel, became a strategic commodity during the World Wars, turning Olinghouse into a bustling operation. Yet from its earliest days, a shadow seemed to hang over the diggings. Miners told of a relentless string of bad luck, strange accidents that defied normal explanation, and an oppressive feeling that clung to the tunnels. The stories form a catalog of eerie misfortune. There were tales of rockfalls that occurred in supposedly stable, freshly timbered sections. Tools would go missing only to be found in impossible locations, deep within sealed-off passages. More chilling were the personal accounts of a pervasive sense of being watched in the underground darkness, of hearing whispers when alone in a shaft, and of sudden, unexplainable drops in temperature that had nothing to do with ventilation. Some men reported seeing fleeting shadows moving just beyond the circle of their lantern light, shapes that vanished when approached. The physical dangers of hard rock mining were ever present, but at Olinghouse they seemed tinged with a malevolent intelligence. This pattern of strange events inevitably crystallized into a story, a cause for the curse. Local legend holds that the trouble stems from a grave desecration. As the story goes, early miners or prospectors, in their rush to exploit the land, disturbed a Native American burial site. In doing so, they ignored warnings and showed disrespect for the sacred ground. In response, a curse was purportedly placed upon the mine, a promise that the earth would take its revenge on those who sought to plunder it without honor. The curse became the narrative framework that made sense of the random tragedies, a moral explanation for mechanical failure. So how do we separate the aura of fact from the tailings of folklore? The mining industry in that era was objectively perilous. Cave-ins, equipment failures, and toxic gases were daily threats. The geology around Olinghouse, like many Nevada mines, was complex and unstable. What a miner might call a cursed tunnel could simply be a poorly understood fault line or a pocket of treacherous, crumbling rock. The psychological weight of working miles underground in total darkness cannot be overstated. It breeds a heightened awareness where every creak of timber becomes a portent, and the mind, deprived of sensory input, can conjure phantoms to fill the silence. The whispers could have been the wind through fissures, the shadows a trick of flickering carbide lamps, yet the persistence and specificity of the stories suggest something more. Why did this particular mine, among hundreds in Nevada, accumulate such a dense cloud of legend? The answer lies in the very nature of how these stories form. A place like Olinghouse becomes a repository for collective anxiety. Every minor accident, every piece of bad luck gets added to the ledger of the curse, retroactively coloring earlier events. One serious injury becomes proof of the curse, which then makes the next strange noise seem like a supernatural confirmation. The legend of the disturbed burial provides a powerful, emotionally resonant origin story. It frames the industrial violence of mining as a spiritual transgression, transforming the impersonal dangers of geology into a personal punishment. This narrative served a purpose. It enforced a kind of respect, a cautionary tale that reminded even the most hardened prospector that the land was not inert, but had a history and a presence that demanded acknowledgement. The curse of Olinghouse is in many ways the haunting of industrialization itself. It represents the guilt and unease of reshaping a sacred landscape for pure material gain, a psychic wound projected onto the tunnels. The mine's troubled history asks us whether a curse is a supernatural force or simply the echo of our own actions, reverberating through the dark long after the dynamite blast has faded. Even immense power and wealth could not shield a family from the desert's most personal kind of vanishing. George Wingfield was not just a wealthy man, he was Nevada's uncrowned king in the early 20th century. A former gambler turned banker, he controlled the state's financial lifeblood through his chain of banks and held decisive political influence. His word could make or break careers, and his fortune, built on Comstock and later gold mining successes, was legendary. He represented the ultimate Nevada success story, a man who had mastered the volatile forces of money and politics. Yet in 1933, a private tragedy pierced this fortress of influence, proving that some mysteries respect no authority. His son, 25-year-old George Wingfield Jr., vanished. The younger Wingfield was being treated for severe depression at a private sanitarium in Reno, a quiet, discreet facility for the affluent. On the evening of September 27th, he stepped out for a walk on the hospital grounds, a common allowance for patients. He simply never returned. He left behind his coat, his wallet, and every personal belonging. George Jr. walked into the cooling twilight and disappeared without a trace. The response was immediate and massive, a search fueled by a fortune and a father's desperation. George Wingfield Sr. mobilized every resource at his command. Private investigators swarmed Reno. His political connections pressured law enforcement to make the case an absolute priority. Flyers were posted across the state and a substantial reward was offered, a sum that would tempt anyone. Search parties combed the Truckee River corridors, the surrounding hills, and every possible route out of the city. It was as if the entire machinery of Wingfield's empire was turned inward, focused on this single, agonizing question, but the desert and the city gave up nothing. No witnesses reported seeing him, no body was found in the river or the arid foothills, no credible ransom note ever arrived, ruling out a straightforward kidnapping for the family's millions. It was as if the earth had opened and quietly closed again. The theories that emerged were as painful as the silence. The official presumption, given his medical condition and the lack of evidence of foul play, leaned towards suicide. Perhaps the young man, in a deep state of despair, had chosen a final, solitary disappearance, ensuring he would never be found. Yet the complete absence of any physical evidence, even a note, left a hollow uncertainty. Others whispered of darker possibilities. Could his father's ruthless business dealings or political machinations have created enemies desperate enough to strike at him through his son? A kidnapping that went horribly wrong, leaving the perpetrators with a body they had to hide forever, was a grim alternative. There was even speculative talk of amnesia, that he had wandered away in a confused state and started a new life elsewhere, unaware of his own identity. Each theory collapsed under its own lack of proof. The haunting core of this mystery is its stark juxtaposition. Here was a man, George Wingfield Sr., who could influence legislatures and bankroll entire industries, who commanded networks of informants and enforcers. Yet he was utterly powerless to find his own son. All the money, all the political chits, all the intimidating influence in the world could not uncover a single clue. The desert enforced a brutal democracy of loss, treating the son of a king with the same silent indifference it would show a penniless prospector. The disappearance of George Wingfield Jr. remains a cold case, a private sorrow etched into the state's public history. It serves as a solemn reminder that in Nevada, some voids cannot be filled, not even with all the silver and gold the earth can yield. The land holds its secrets close, whether they belong to an ancient people, a legendary rider, or a grieving magnate's only son. The desert's silence could swallow empires and erase heirs, but its most unsettling mysteries often unfold under the morning sun. In the planned, orderly community of Boulder City, a place built for Hoover Dam workers and known for its quiet, safe streets, a 22-year-old woman named Mary Lee simply ceased to exist. It was a spring morning in 1978, a time when the small town felt far removed from the vast, threatening emptiness surrounding it. Mary was waiting at a bus stop on a residential street, a mundane daily ritual for countless people. Then she was gone. The scene left behind was a chilling snapshot of interrupted normalcy. Her purse sat on the bench, her wallet and identification inside. A single grocery bag containing a few purchased items rested beside it. It was as if she had been plucked from the spot in an instant, leaving the artifacts of her ordinary day behind. There were no signs of a struggle, no screams overheard by neighbors in nearby homes. The bus stop itself, an utterly commonplace feature of any town, became a portal into the inexplicable. The investigation that followed mirrored the scene's confusion. Mary Lee had no known enemies, no tumultuous personal life that pointed to a motive. She was, by all accounts, a typical young woman going about her business. Without a body, detectives were left with a profound void. Was it a random, opportunistic abduction by a passing stranger? Could it have been someone she knew, who managed to coax her away without a commotion? The lack of forensic evidence and the absence of any credible witnesses created a vacuum where theories swirled but could not land. This case chills precisely because of its location. Boulder City was and still is an oasis of calm, a town with famously low crime rates. This did not happen in the lonely wastes of the Black Rock Desert or the shadowy canyons of a mining camp. It happened on a sunny street in a community designed for safety and family life. That contrast makes the mystery so deeply personal. It violates the implicit contract of civilization, that in our ordered spaces we are protected from the raw unpredictability of the wild. Mary Lee's disappearance proved that the desert's enigmatic cruelty did not respect city limits. For decades, the case has remained frozen, a true cold case with no new leads to thaw it. The enduring question is not just who took Mary Lee, but how a person can vanish so completely from a place of perceived security. It suggests that some mysteries are not about the landscape, but about the human capacity for predation that can surface anywhere, even at a sunlit bus stop. Her story lingers as a quiet, haunting counterpoint to the epic tales of lost wagon trains and cursed mines, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying void is the one that opens in the middle of a perfectly ordinary day. The orderly streets of Boulder City give way to the wind-scoured silence of a place time forgot. High in the desolate mountains of central Nevada, the ghost town of Belmont stands as a skeleton of the silver boom, its empty windows staring across the sagebrush. In the 1960s, long after the last resident had moved on, a discovery was made among the ruins that proved even a dead town could hold a deadly secret. A hiker or prospector, drawn by the allure of abandonment, stumbled upon a grim sight, the remains of an unidentified man. This was not a relic of the 19th century, but a modern victim of homicide, left to the elements in a place where no one was left to hear a cry for help. The scene was a forensic nightmare. Belmont was not just quiet, it was utterly empty, a landscape of crumbling brick and splintered wood. There were no neighbors to interview, no recent activity to reconstruct, and the harsh desert climate had already done its work on the evidence. The victim himself was a blank slate, a John Doe with no identification, his personal history erased as completely as the town's prosperity. The very isolation that made Belmont a perfect place to hide a body also made it nearly impossible to solve a crime. Law enforcement faced a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. They scoured missing persons reports from across the state and beyond, but in an era before computerized databases and DNA profiling, matching an unknown body to a name was a monumental task. The transient nature of the West worked against them. Was he a drifter passing through, a loner drawn to the romance of ghost towns, a man with a past who thought he could disappear into the desert, only to have someone make that disappearance permanent? The investigation inevitably turned to the town's own ghostly population, the records of the men who had once lived and worked there. Could this be a former resident, someone who had returned for reasons unknown, or perhaps a descendant entangled in some old, forgotten feud over a mining claim? Each lead dissolved into speculation, thwarted by the decades of silence that had settled over the hills. The core questions are haunting in their simplicity. Who was this man, and what brought his life to a violent end in a place that civilization had already abandoned? This mystery highlights a different kind of vanishing, one where not just a person, but the very context of their life is buried by time. In a bustling city, a murder leaves ripples, a network of connections for detectives to trace. Here, the crime occurred in a vacuum. The town itself became an accomplice after the fact, its profound quiet swallowing not just a body, but every motive, every relationship, every spark of conflict that led to that final moment. The Belmont John Doe case is a stark reminder that some secrets are not actively guarded, but simply surrender to the landscape. It asks us how we solve a crime when the witnesses are the wind and the walls, and the only testimony is written in dust and bones. Even the most enduring ghost stories begin with a single, lost soul. High in the Sierra Nevada, along the rocky trails above Lake Tahoe, a different kind of specter is said to walk. Locals and hikers have spoken for generations of the phantom prospector, the ghost of an old miner seen trudging along remote paths, his pack heavy on his back, his face etched with a timeless weariness. He is not a menacing figure, but a sorrowful one, forever searching for a claim he can never find or a cabin he can never return to. These sightings are not confined to shadowy ruins. They occur in the brilliant alpine daylight, a shimmering figure against the granite and pine that vanishes when approached. This persistent legend is more than just a campfire tale. It is likely rooted in the very real and very frequent tragedies of the Comstock era. The mountains were a gauntlet of peril for those dreaming of silver. A lone prospector could meet his end in countless ways: a fall into a hidden crevasse, a sudden avalanche, a rock slide in a narrow canyon, or simply succumbing to exposure during a brutal Sierra storm. Search parties were often impractical or impossible to organize in such vast, rugged terrain. Many men simply went into the hills and never came out, their fates forever unknown. Their unmarked graves are the scattered bones of the mountains themselves. The phantom prospector is the collective memory of all those vanished men, given a single, haunting form. He is the unanswered question made flesh, or rather made mist. Folklore scholars suggest that such apparitions often arise from a community's need to explain and personify a repeated, unresolved trauma. In a region built on mining, the unexplained disappearance of solitary men was a common trauma. The ghost story provides a narrative, a sense of continuity, where a cold statistic becomes a character with a purpose, even in death. He wanders because his story lacks an ending, and in wandering, he keeps the memory of that peril alive. This blending of fact and folklore serves a powerful, cautionary function. The tale of the phantom is an inherited warning, passed down through generations of outdoorsmen. It speaks to the enduring dangers of the high country, reminding even modern hikers with satellite maps that the mountains demand respect. That shimmering figure on the trail is an echo from the past, a reminder that the pursuit of wealth in Nevada's wilderness often demanded the ultimate price, and that some who paid it are still, in a sense, out there settling their debt. The story ensures that those nameless men are not truly gone, but transformed into permanent residents of the landscape they once sought to conquer. Reno's orderly streets of the 1920s concealed a horror that would unravel the very idea of a safe neighborhood. On a quiet October morning in 1921, the police were called to a modest bungalow on Bell Street. Inside, they discovered a scene of almost unimaginable violence. A woman named Maud Wallace lay dead in her bedroom, brutally murdered with an axe. The weapon was left at the foot of her bed, a stark and grisly signature. The home showed no signs of forced entry, and robbery did not appear to be the motive. It was a deeply personal, ferocious crime that had occurred in the heart of a sleeping city, and it sent immediate shockwaves through the community. The investigation fixated on a prime suspect almost from the start, Maud's estranged husband, a man named William. He had a volatile temper, and the couple's separation was known to be acrimonious. Witnesses placed him near the house around the time of the murder, and his behavior afterward was seen as suspicious. Yet, despite intense police scrutiny and a coroner's inquest that pointed squarely at him, the district attorney hesitated. The case, built on circumstantial evidence, was deemed too weak for a successful prosecution. No arrest was ever made. The file grew cold, leaving a brutal killing officially unsolved and a gaping wound of injustice in the public mind. This vacuum of legal resolution is where the story transforms from a true crime into a permanent local legend. The house on Bell Street, now forever branded the Reno Axe Murder House, could not move on because the community could not. The lack of a trial, a conviction, or reason meant the narrative was left unfinished, and an unfinished story, especially one so violent, demands an ending. When facts fail, folklore rushes in to provide one. Soon, new occupants of the house began reporting phenomena that defied explanation. They spoke of cold spots that lingered in specific hallways, a pervasive feeling of being watched, and the sound of a woman's weeping echoing through empty rooms. Objects would disappear and reappear in illogical places. Some claimed to see the apparition of a woman in a period nightgown, her form flickering near the bedroom where the murder occurred. These were not the tales of imaginative children, but the uneasy reports of adults, families who had sought a normal home and instead found themselves living inside an unresolved trauma. The haunting became the community's subconscious attempt to solve the crime. If the courts could not deliver justice, perhaps the very walls of the house would bear witness, replaying the tragedy until someone or something acknowledged the truth. The paranormal activity served as a psychic placeholder, a way to keep Maud Wallace's memory and the question of her killer alive in the collective consciousness. It turned a brick and wood structure into a monument to impunity. This pattern reveals a profound truth about how we process violent mysteries. An unsolved crime creates a rupture in the fabric of a place, a tear that never fully mends. The stories of hauntings are the echoes that spill from that rupture. They are not necessarily evidence of ghosts, but are undeniable evidence of history's lingering weight. The Reno Axe Murder House stands as a stark example, a place where a single night of horror etched itself into the foundation, proving that some doors, once opened by violence, can never truly be closed. Gold was not just pulled from the ground in Nevada, it was also snatched from the iron rails that crossed it. In the cool autumn darkness of November 4, 1870, a small, determined gang brought the modern world to a halt. Near a remote water stop known as Independence, between the towns of Winnemucca and the Humboldt River, they piled railroad ties onto the tracks of the Southern Pacific Line. When the westbound express train ground to a stop, the robbers emerged from the shadows. They were not a large band, but they were efficient, covering the engineer and fireman with rifles while others moved to the express car. Using a sledgehammer and crowbar, they forced the heavy door open and confronted the terrified messenger inside. Their target was specific, a shipment of gold coins and bullion being transported to San Francisco. They took it all, loading the heavy sacks onto their waiting horses before vanishing back into the vast, undifferentiated night of the Great Basin. It was a clean, professional operation, netting them a haul estimated at over $40,000 in gold, a fortune that would be worth nearly $1 million today. The heist was a success, but the aftermath would birth a far greater mystery. While a portion of the loot was later recovered, along with some of the gang members, the majority of that heavy, glittering treasure simply disappeared. The gold was never found. In the official record, the case was closed with arrests, but in the lore of the West, it was just beginning. The most persistent theory is as straightforward as the desert itself. The gang, knowing they were pursued and burdened by the weight of their prize, chose to hide it somewhere in that stark, rolling landscape between the robbery site and the Humboldt River. They buried the gold. They picked a spot only they would know, a distinctive rock formation, a lone juniper tree, or a dry wash that looked like every other dry wash. The plan would have been to let the heat die down, then return to retrieve their fortune at leisure. But the West was a dangerous place. Some of the robbers were caught. Others may have died in unrelated shootings or simply drifted apart. The secret of the location died with them, leaving the gold to sleep beneath the sagebrush, waiting for a hand that never came. This transforms the story from a simple robbery into a permanent treasure hunt. For over a century, the lure of that lost shipment has drawn prospectors of a different kind, armed with old maps and metal detectors instead of picks and shovels. They have scoured the area, following cryptic clues from old newspaper accounts and prisoner confessions, yet the gold remains stubbornly hidden. The reasons for its enduring disappearance speak to the very nature of the Nevada landscape. First, the sheer scale of the search area is overwhelming. The stretch between Winnemucca and the Humboldt Sink is a monumental expanse of similar-looking hills, valleys, and arid plains. A hole dug 150 years ago would have been reclaimed by erosion, dust storms, and the slow march of vegetation. A marker, if there ever was one, could have been toppled by a winter storm or carted off by a later settler for building stone. The land itself is an active participant in keeping the secret, constantly smoothing over the scars left by men. Second, the directions were likely never written down. They existed in the memories of a few men who used landmarks that had personal meaning, landmarks that may have been clear to them, but are meaningless to us. That distinctive pile of rocks might have been bulldozed for Ranch Road in the 1920s. That lone tree certainly would have died and fallen decades ago. The treasure map, if it ever existed, was drawn on the shifting canvas of memory and a changing terrain. Finally, there is the tantalizing possibility that the gold was not buried at all. Could a member of the gang have double-crossed the others, secretly recovering the cash and fleeing? Or was it found long ago by a lucky cowboy or sheepherder who wisely kept his mouth shut, spending it slowly and quietly over a lifetime? These theories are less romantic but entirely possible, adding another layer of frustrating ambiguity. The lost loot of the Southern Pacific robbery endures because it is a tangible mystery. It is not a ghost or a curse, but cold, hard metal that should be findable. Its continued absence is a testament to the desert's profound talent for absorption. It swallowed the efforts of those robbers just as completely as it swallowed their treasure, turning a criminal act into a permanent question mark on the map. That missing fortune asks us what it means for something of immense value to simply step off the stage of history, leaving behind only the echo of its possibility. Even the brightest neon cannot illuminate every shadow. In 1976, a discovery was made in the desert just outside Las Vegas that would become a permanent, silent rebuke to the city's glittering promise of fame and fortune. A well-dressed woman was found deceased, her body resting in the vast, empty landscape that serves as the stark counterpoint to the Strip's electric glow. She was meticulously attired, suggesting care and intention, yet she carried no identification. In a city built on spectacle, the media immediately seized on a narrative that felt tragically poetic. They dubbed her the Las Vegas showgirl. It was a compelling image, a beautiful performer discarded in the wilderness, a dark fairy tale for the entertainment capital. But it was a fiction. There was no evidence she had ever been a dancer, a singer, or any part of that world. No missing persons report matched her description. No casino, no theater, no colleague ever came forward to say they knew her. The label was a placeholder for a profound emptiness, a guess that filled the void where her identity should have been. Investigators worked with what they had, which was only the physical woman herself. Forensic artists created a reconstruction, a sculpted likeness based on her features, hoping to spark recognition in a passerby. Her photograph was circulated in newspapers across the country, part of a nationwide plea for a name. Yet every lead dissolved. She remained a Jane Doe, a person without a history, her life story reduced to the clinical details of an autopsy report and the clothing she wore on her final day. This failure to identify her is the core of the haunting. In most places, a Jane Doe case is a tragedy of isolation. In Las Vegas, it becomes something more philosophically chilling. This is a city of assumed identities, a place where people come to reinvent themselves, to shed their past and become someone new, if only for a weekend. Stage names, aliases, and manufactured personas are part of the currency. Here, someone could vanish not because they were hidden, but because the very concept of a fixed, real identity is often willingly suspended. The mystery of this particular woman forces a difficult question. Did she come to Vegas to become someone, or to escape from being someone else? Was she a tourist whose life was tragically cut short, leaving family a continent away who never connected a missing loved one to a news brief about a body in Nevada? Or was she a resident who had so successfully compartmentalized her life that her disappearance created no ripple in the separate world she inhabited? The desert did not just take her life, it seemed to have erased her entire existence prior to that moment. This case exposes the fragile thread that connects a person to their own name. In a community filled with transient workers, performers on short contracts, and visitors from every corner of the globe, a person could truly dissolve if that single thread was cut. Her well-dressed appearance suggests she was not destitute, not someone living on the margins. She was in some way connected, and yet that connection snapped without a sound. The enduring power of this cold case lies in its stark contrast. It happened not in a remote canyon, but in the backyard of a city of millions. It involved a woman who took clear pride in her presentation, yet who is remembered only as a mystery. She becomes a symbol for all the quiet disappearances that get lost in the glare of the marquees, a reminder that the most complete vanishing act might not happen in the empty desert, but in the crowded heart of a city that specializes in illusions. How many people, this case whispers, can simply step out of their own story without anyone noticing the plot has changed? Deep within the sun-bleached stone of a dry lakebed lies a message we can see but cannot read. The Winnemucca Lake petroglyphs are carved into limestone boulders that once stood at the edge of an ancient, vast lake, a body of water that shimmered here over 10,000 years ago. These are not mere scratches, but deep, intricate designs, patterns of diamonds, concentric circles, and branching trees etched with a confident, purposeful hand. Scientific analysis suggests they could be among the oldest rock carvings in all of North America, dating back as far as perhaps 14,800 years. That is a staggering timeline, placing their creation in an era when great ice sheets still gripped much of the continent, and the landscape around them was a fertile wetland teeming with life, not the arid basin we see today. The carvings themselves are a breathtaking sight, a direct line to a human mind from a world that has utterly vanished. The mystery is not their existence, but their intention. What were these ancient artists trying to say? The symbols are abstract, a language without a key. Some researchers, looking at the patterns, see a possible record of the world around them. The branching tree-like forms could be maps of river systems that fed the ancient lake. The series of concentric circles might chart the shrinking shoreline as the climate dried, a millennia-long chronicle of environmental change etched in stone. More controversially, a few have proposed that certain complex groupings could represent celestial events, like a supernova or a comet, witnessed and memorialized by people for whom the sky was a living storybook. These interpretations are compelling, but they are guesses. We are trying to translate a thought from a culture that left no dictionary, no Rosetta Stone to bridge the gap of centuries. The challenge of deciphering them is immense. Without a living tradition connected to the artists, every theory is speculative. The symbols could be spiritual, marking a sacred site. They could be practical, denoting territorial boundaries or important resources. They could be artistic, a simple expression of beauty and pattern making. Or most likely, they could be all these things at once, a layered communication we're only equipped to see in fragments. This is the silent puzzle of the petroglyphs. There are a message in a bottle, but the bottle is made of stone, and the message is written in a script whose alphabet we have lost. We can measure their age, we can photograph their curves, but we cannot hear the stories they were meant to tell. They endure as Nevada's most profound and patient mystery, a testament not to a sudden disappearance, but to the slow, inevitable drift of meaning across time. They remind us that some secrets are not hidden, but displayed in plain sight, waiting for a listener who may never come. The petroglyphs speak of a world that vanished slowly, but the sky over the Sierra Nevada can erase a story in an instant. On a clear December afternoon in 1964, a small single-engine Piper Cherokee lifted off from Reno, bound for the airport in Bishop, California. On board were the pilot and 3 passengers, setting out on a short routine flight over the familiar, snow-dusted peaks. The last radio contact was unremarkable, a standard check-in that gave no hint of trouble. Then the sky swallowed them whole. The aircraft, its 4 occupants, and every piece of its metal and fabric construction vanished without a trace. It was as if a doorway had opened in the atmosphere and closed again, leaving behind only silence and a deepening mystery. An immediate and massive search operation swept the proposed flight path. Given the era, this was no casual glance from the air. Military and civilian planes crisscrossed the rugged terrain of the eastern Sierra, scanning every canyon and rocky slope. Ground teams, including experienced mountaineers, combed the areas deemed most likely for a crash. They searched for the glint of aluminum, the flash of a broken wing, any sign of impact or debris. But the mountains gave up nothing, no scattered wreckage, no personal effects, no fuel slick on a frozen lake. It was a complete and utter blank. This absence defied all logic. A plane does not dissolve. Even the most catastrophic crash leaves a signature, a scar on the landscape and fragments for searchers to find. The Piper Cherokee's disappearance suggested something else, a break in the normal chain of events between point A and point B. The first theory is one of tragic misjudgment, a simple navigation error in deceptively complex terrain. The Sierra Nevada presents a notorious challenge for visual flight. Passes and valleys can look identical, clouds can form with startling speed, and a pilot can become disoriented, flying into a box canyon with no way out. A sudden violent downdraft or microburst could have forced the plane into the mountainside with such force that the wreckage was buried under an avalanche or deep snow, hidden from aerial view. Yet the search continued into subsequent summers when the snows melted and still nothing emerged. The durability of the mystery fuels darker speculation. Could there have been foul play? The possibility, however remote, hangs in the air. Was the flight not what it seemed? Could a deliberate act have taken the plane far off its intended course, into the trackless wilderness of Nevada's own interior deserts, where no one thought to look? The complete lack of any radio distress call is a critical detail. It suggests either an event so sudden it allowed no time to react, or a situation where the pilot was unable or unwilling to call for help. This single detail transforms the case from a probable accident into a profound enigma. The story of the lost Piper Cherokee stands apart from other vanishings. It is not a tale of the desert floor, but of the open sky, a realm where disappearance feels even more absolute. A wagon train leaves behind bones, a mine might hide a body, but an airplane can simply cease to be. This event asks a haunting question about the limits of our search. We assume that what goes up must come down, and that we will find where it landed. But what if in the vast theater of the Nevada sky, that fundamental rule sometimes fails? The mountains keep their secret, leaving us to wonder if some journeys have no destination, only an endless, silent flight into the unknown. A motel where clowns watch from every wall, and a grand hotel where a lady in red wanders the 5th floor. These are not just haunted houses. They are Nevada's collective, unconscious given a room number. In the shadow of the Mispa Hotel's elegant facade, or within the deliberately unsettling lobby of the Clown Motel in Tonopah, the state's violent and unresolved past finds a voice. These places are not merely creepy, they are cultural pressure valves where stories of the paranormal become the living folklore of a landscape built on sudden fortune and sudden death. Why does this particular state seem to breed such persistent tales? The answer lies in the very ingredients of its history. Nevada is a place of extreme contrasts, of glittering wealth mined from barren rock, of communities that sprang up overnight and were abandoned just as fast. This cycle of boom and bust creates a profound psychic residue. A town like Tonopah, which thrived on silver and then watched its lifeblood drain away, is left with empty buildings and unfulfilled dreams. That emptiness, that silence where there was once roaring life, demands an explanation. Ghost stories fill that silence. They populate the abandoned mine shaft with a presence, give a name to the cold draft in the hallway of a deserted hotel, and provide a narrative for the unease that settles over a place where ambition met a dead end. The stories are often rooted in specific tragic events: a mining accident, a jilted lover's suicide, a murder in a room now rented to tourists. The haunting becomes a way to keep that memory alive, to ensure that a life lost in the chaos of a boomtown is not forgotten. It is a form of communal remembrance, however chilling. Furthermore, the sheer isolation of so much of Nevada amplifies the supernatural. In the vast quiet between towns, the mind has room to wander. A strange light on a distant ridge becomes a phantom miner's lantern. A creak in an old boarding house becomes the footstep of a long-dead resident. The desert itself, with its timeless quality and stark beauty, feels inherently mystical, a backdrop that makes the idea of a spirit lingering outside of time seem not just possible, but plausible. The Clown Motel, sitting adjacent to an old cemetery, leans directly into this synthesis. It embodies the state's comfort with the macabre, its acknowledgement of mortality, right beside the road of the living. The ghost stories of the Mizpah, like that of the lady in red who is said to have jumped from a balcony, are polished tales now told on guided tours. They have been commercialized, yes, but they began as echoes of real sorrow from the town's tumultuous early days. These supernatural hotspots ultimately serve a deeper purpose than just a thrill. They are Nevada's way of processing its own biography. Every vanished prospector, every murdered gambler, every heartbroken soul left in the dust of a played-out mine has a potential story. In the absence of closure in the historical record, the community provides its own through folklore. The ghost is the unanswered question made flesh, the unresolved crime given a form, the lonely death granted a perpetual presence. These tales ensure that the past is never truly empty, that the desert silence is always waiting to be interrupted by a whisper from another time. They remind us that some mysteries are never meant to be solved, only inhabited, turning the state's countless untold endings into a permanent and haunting residency. From ancient cliff cities to lights that dance over empty valleys, Nevada's landscape is a museum of the unexplained. We have walked with the ghosts of the ancestral Puebloans and stood beside a bus stop in Boulder City where a young woman vanished into thin air. We have followed the glittering trail of lost Comstock silver, cursed or merely coveted, and looked up as police officers in Reno watched a silent dogfight with a craft that defied our world. We have seen how a desert lake can erase a man's fate and how a mountain pass can swallow an airplane without a single trace. Each story, whether etched in stone 10,000 years ago or whispered in a Tonopah motel last week, is a thread in a vast and hidden tapestry. This is the state's true biography, written not in official records but in unanswered questions. The sheer scale and silence of the land itself seems to be the common denominator, a boundless space that absorbs secrets as easily as the summer heat drinks a raindrop. It provides the perfect setting for a story to end mid-sentence, for evidence to be scoured away by the wind, and for a mystery to settle into the bedrock of local legend. These unsolved cases are not failures of history, they are its shadow archives, preserving the moments where the narrative broke down and certainty dissolved. They remind us that for every fact neatly recorded, there may be a dozen whispers that the desert chose to keep. So we turn the final page of this exploration with a question for you. Of all the enigmas we have uncovered, from the phantom prospector to the vaults of Area 51, which one lingers in your mind? Do you have a personal Nevada story, a strange light seen from a lonely highway, or a family tale from a forgotten mining camp? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you are drawn to the places where history's map has blank spaces, be sure to subscribe. Our journey into the world's greatest unsolved mysteries has only just begun.